Hello everyone, we are live. I'm hoping you can hear me and see me okay. That's always a good start to the episode. Welcome to This Week at Work, where we bring you the latest trending news and all things HR, technology and future of work. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Matt Burns. How are you doing?
No crimes yet, but the day's still young.
I was thinking about more like behind you, what you're going to cook us. You've got the microwave there, you got the cooker. What's on the schedule?
It seems like every time we have one of these weekly calls, I'm somewhere different. It's like, where in the world is Matt?
It's
I
true.
For my microphone again. I'm in Kingston, Ontario, near Canada's capital. It's an incredible place. The weather's been all over the map, but I'm having a great time here in Ontario, and looking forward to being back in Vancouver next week.
The joys of hybrid work then.
It's true. I'm a nomad of all sorts.
You are, exactly, and the beard's strong.
Thank you.
Whenever we post a picture of you, it's always you normally clean shaven, like when we first met. And so I don't even know that guy. I'm like, who is that guy? No. Where's the beard at?
The pandemic has changed me in ways I can't even describe.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about something that came up yesterday. It's a leaked audio of Apple's vice president of people and retail giving store workers what seemed to be an anti-union speech. There's been a lot of reaction, some good, some bad. So Matt, I think this is really interesting because you've worked for some of these large organizations and you've been there. You've been in these shoes, right?
I've written that script and I've delivered that message.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other sort of context to add to that is part of that is that they hired an anti-union company of sorts, who then provided the Apple managers scripts, literally scripts of this is exactly what you have to say. So before we jump into the article in a bit more detail, I'd love to hear your thoughts given your experience having done this in some of the world's largest global brands.
Yeah, well, let me declare my biases up front. I mean, I grew up in a household where my father was a union leader and always voted on the labor side of the political spectrum. I've worked myself in unionized employers and non-union employers, and as you referenced, some of the world's largest non-union employers, and have been participated in collective bargaining and arbitrations and worked alongside unions for years. I struggle with this for a couple different reasons. So I look at the context of Apple and their situation, and I look at the broader context. And I think in the broader sense of the term, I think we would both agree, Chris, that the world has changed dramatically over the last 2 years. And whether it's the rising rates of income inequality or the challenges around inflation, the challenges faced by workers of all industries, of all organizations are very real. And when you see prices of goods going up 10, 15, 20, 30% in some cases, and wages are not rising at the same level, and you have social issues like the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter, employees are increasingly demanding more from their organizations. And whether it's wages, whether it's recognition of rights, whether it's benefits and entitlements, employees are increasingly asking for, demanding for, and in a lot of cases publicly declaring the requirement for additional support from organizations. At the same time, the piece of the clip that I heard was, from a legal perspective, like textbook. You mentioned they've hired a firm to bring in and write the scripts. They walk the line very carefully between affirming the employee's rights to organize and also articulating their position on why they believe a unionized interface between an employer and an employee isn't often the best thing for the organization. And here's why they would say that. So anytime you have an intermediary between two parts, it will irreparably impact your organizational culture. Now, some would argue for the better. And in situations, if you go back to the history of labor unions to begin with, let's be clear. Labor unions were originally, formed as a consequence of employers who were exploiting their workers. I think about people working in the resource industry or manufacturing, where workers were getting hurt, losing their lives, and being treated as very, very, very poor, replaceable parts in a broader cog. Labor unions came into play, demanded rights, demanded accountability, demanded fair treatment for the workforce. So over the course of the last 25 to 30 years, as employment legislation has evolved, as our thinking around the relationship between employers and employees has evolved, unions themselves have been under attack, and their relevancy has been questioned in a lot of different contexts. And I've spoken to employees in labor organizations that have said, well, why would I want to have this conduit between myself and my manager? Why would I want to pay a portion of my wages to a third party that may or may not serve my interests? And whether you agree with Apple's take or not, I think they have every right to articulate the pros and cons of what a potential organizing effort would look like, and ultimately turn the decision over to their employees to make that final call. And I think that, if anything, this should be a large wake-up call for employers of all stripes. Because, Chris, if I think about the employers that we would put on the list of most evolved and most innovative and culture-centric, I think Apple would be at or near the top of that list. So if that organization is struggling under the weight of the macroeconomic and extraneous circumstances, I think about the small to medium businesses and other industries where employees may not have access to the level of services, may not have the level of brand pride of working for one of the world's preeminent organizations. And I hope that organizations take this as a warning sign, but also as a catalyst that the relationship between your employees and the organization is as essential as a relationship between your customers and the organization. Yeah. And if you don't handle that relationship well, people will demand greater service. They will demand greater rights. And that could, in some cases, lead to an organizing effort that does irreparably damage or impact positively that relationship. So, I'm a bit torn on this one because I see it from both sides. And ultimately, I hope that the employees and the employer, in this case, Apple, come together and have a real honest dialogue about some of the things that are being raised as very real concerns from that workforce. Chris, I worked in retail for 20 years. I deeply understand the challenges faced by that particular segment of their workforce and how it would be different than their corporate offices or people that do have the privilege to work remotely or have more flexibility or more in senior leadership positions. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the days and weeks to come. But I think this is really good fodder for conversation today. No,
definitely. Well, for those people that haven't heard the clip, let's play it. Hopefully we don't get in trouble. Playing on links. This is an article you see from Vice. When they address this to their entire employee population, obviously someone took it upon themselves to video record it. I think it went out to over 58,000 employees. So if you play that video, hopefully you don't get an advert. That would be the worst time to get a YouTube ad right now. And turn up the video audio. I can't hear that on my end. Give me a second. There we go.
And this is the union discussions that have been happening in the US. I want to start out by saying that it is your right to join a union. And it's equally your right not to join a union. And if you're faced with that decision, I want to encourage you to consult a wide range of people and sources to make sure you understand what it could mean to work at Apple under a collective bargaining agreement. Over the last few years, we have been through so much together, and we've worked hard to always pull together. Our guiding principle throughout is to do our best, to do what's right, and to always support each other. And like our credo says, to learn and to grow. And together, we've made so many changes and adjustments to the way we support our customers and the way we support you. From raising pay to giving special bonuses, from additional vacation and sick leave days, to expanded new parent leave, to paid family care, and emergency backup care for
Could you pause
all
that a minute,
team
Bruno?
members.
That was one of the things I saw the reactions, Matt, is one of the things that was mentioned is that this may affect the ability for us to give you support, compensation and benefits.
Yeah.
Is that something you can relate to? Because that's something that when I originally saw that, and that they said that this may affect and make it difficult for us to improve working conditions, to provide the employee benefits. And I saw a lot of people comment about that. What are your thoughts on that before we jump back in?
Put me on the spot with that one, right? I think it's again of two minds. So it's a veiled threat in one sense.
That's why, yeah, exactly. I mean, people.
If you want to interpret, and it's also fair and accurate, because what will happen in a unionized environment is when you bring a third party in, they're going to have an interest that may not align with individual employee interests. When you join a collective of any kind, an organization, a union, an association, you are giving up some personal agency to that organization, and you may not always like the results of that transaction. And there are cases I've sat through where, Chris, we've tried to introduce in previous employers employee benefits that specifically would have impacted, for example, paternity leave. Remember, the previous organization, we tried to introduce paternity leave as a benefit, and the union pushed back because it wasn't a benefit being provided to all employees. So rather than us introducing that, we had to pull that back and then essentially scrap the idea altogether. And the individuals who wanted paternity leave weren't able to access that benefit because we couldn't offer it. Mm-hmm. Now, again, the union, I don't think specifically in that case was against fathers who were trying to raise families, but they take the broader view, and that, as a consequence, could impact programming. The other thing that people don't often talk about with unions is it will increase the cost of overheads in the organization, because in the case of most union contracts, they're negotiating pay rate increases, which for a merit-based organization like Apple or any others, if individuals become a part of a bargaining unit, in a lot of cases, their pay and their pay progression is prescribed. It could be a percentage of length of service or hours worked in role, or there could be contractually agreed to pay increments over the course of many, many years of a contract. And that may or may not align, again, with an individual sense of personal merit. Again, the collective may increase, but for a high performer, somebody who has traditionally been recognized for their performances and achievements and received opportunities and benefits and salary increases as a consequence of those things, those could be impacted in a situation where a bargaining unit comes between an employer and employee.
Yeah.
I want to be very, very clear. I'm not arguing for or against this, but I think that they're right to paint both sides of the picture, and to simply say that joining a union for the case of an individual employee is all positive is not a factual statement. But it could be, on balance, a more positive decision for a majority of employees. And this is where we have to, from an employee perspective, you have to decide what weighs out, individual self-interest or collective growth. And I'm not close enough to Apple's culture to speak to that, but I think Apple's right to point that out, that relationship would change, and some of the dynamics around merit-based and pay for performance would have to go away for that segment of the workforce, which may or may not be aligned with their expectations.
It's interesting because it's kind of maybe almost counterintuitive, because one of the reasons that this is taking place in the first place is that the workers have cited, that their pay is an issue, the benefits, unprecedented hours, and kind of what you're saying is it actually could, and that's what Apple's saying, could make that even more difficult now for us to address those issues.
Chris, I've negotiated agreements where when you factored in the union wages, the union dues, pardon my expression, when you factor in the union dues, employees were worse off after the collective agreement.
Wow. All right, let's carry on with the video. Thanks for the insight there, Matt.
Full-time and part-time. I cherish the relationship that we have. In my view, that's what makes our experience at Apple so special. It provides the foundation for us to be open and honest with each other, to listen and to learn together, and to respond to feedback in real time. We have a relationship that's based on an open and collaborative and direct engagement, which I feel could fundamentally change if a store is represented by a union under a collective bargaining agreement. And I worry about what it would mean to put another organization in the middle of our relationship. An organization that does not have a deep understanding of Apple or our business. And most importantly, one that I do not believe shares our commitment to you. Apple moves incredibly fast. It's one thing I love about our work in retail. It means that we need to be able to move fast too. And I worry that because the union would bring its own legally mandated rules that would determine how we work through issues, it could make it harder for us to act swiftly to address things that you raise. I'm committed to and proud of our ability to act fast, to support our teams, to support you. But I don't know that we could have moved as quickly under a collective bargaining agreement as it could limit our ability to make immediate, widespread changes to improve your experience. And I think that's what's really at stake here. I am deeply committed to making Apple the best it can be for you. Everything from scheduling to pay and benefits, to development, to the experience and the environment in the stores, and the things that are important to you and your individual journey. I know these things mean a lot to you, and they mean a lot to me too. It has been great to be with so many of our teams over these past few weeks. I always learn so much through my visits and other interactions with you. I know we have room to improve, and there are some areas where we need to move even faster. And I'm always so appreciative that you share your feedback with us so that we can build our plans together. Very soon we'll be sharing the results of our most recent pulse survey and our plans to act on what we've learned. Your feedback is essential to us. I want to thank you for all that you share with us. I love the saying that feedback is a gift. It truly is. And I want you to know that we are listening and will continue to listen so that we can support you and make your experience at Apple even better. I'll close by saying that I really look forward to continuing to build on our very special culture and the relationship that we share together. So thank you for everything that you do for our customers and for each other, and for all that you bring to Apple. I'm so grateful for this team. Take very good care, and I look forward to seeing many more of you in person soon.
Cool, we can wrap it up there.
So this is where I can be a bit harsher with Apple. So I've tried to walk a line and be balanced. I think it's important to present both sides.
Yeah.
It's a slam dunk to go after the large company that and the idea that they're exploiting workers. Here's the hard truth. And I don't know the situation at Apple, so I want to state my limitations. But in my experience, for an organization like Apple to be at a place where there is significant concern around unionization in their retail workforce, the aforementioned commitment to employee feedback and taking action against it is probably not true. So most cases, employees that are in a non-union environment that don't have a union background, they often don't jump to zero to unionization overnight. It comes as a consequence of repeated attempts to provide feedback to managers, perhaps at the localized level, but perhaps also at the centralized level through feedback. So it seems like Apple does consistent pulse surveys.
Yeah.
If that feedback is not being acted upon, or worse, commitments are made that things will improve and they're not, employees will reach a state of frustration where they feel no other vehicle or alternative makes sense other than to look at having third-party representation and as a lever to move some of these things forward. This is no different than an athlete acquiring an agent to work closely with a sports franchise. If they don't feel like their individual interests will be well represented in that relationship without a third party, that's where they're going to go to next. So I think if I was Apple, I'd be taking a long, hard look in the mirror and at the opportunities previously to take action to make change in the areas that their employees are citing as some of the rationale for pursuing an organizing effort, because it seems like they may have fallen short in that area and they only then have themselves to blame.
Yeah. Do you think that this is perhaps part of the wave of unionization we're seeing? We're seeing it with Amazon recently. We're seeing it with Starbucks. There's this huge major anti-union sort of employer narrative, which is being pushed out by the media as well. Do you think that could play into it as well?
like I said before, I think this is not only something that's happening at Apple and Amazon and Starbucks. This is happening globally. We are experiencing unprecedented times, at least for our generation, Chris, around inflation, a global pandemic. And the fact is, the income inequality problems that we experienced pre-pandemic have gotten exponentially worse, and they are disproportionately affecting individuals who are working in some of these roles, in retail, in warehouse environments like Amazon. These are the individuals who have been disadvantaged by no fault of their own as a consequence of what has happened over the last 2.5 years. As housing prices have soared, as the price of gas has soared, as the price of goods and services has soared, these people bear the brunt of inflation. It's not the individuals in leadership at Apple. It's not the full stack developer making $300,000 a year. It's the individual working in a retail location in a mall. It's the individual working in an Amazon warehouse or a barista behind the counter at a Starbucks location. These people are carrying the lion's share of the additional burden of the economy that we find ourselves in right now. And they're looking for recourse to try and recoup some of that, if you will, lost agency. So unions often provide a very predictable and historically proven method to do that. And it's not simply a matter of get a union, we all get pay increases, everything is happy. You have to look at both sides of this. So I'm not surprised. You're actually going to see more of this. And like I said before, it's shocking to me that Apple is now in this conversation. I kind of expect it from Amazon. That's a very predictable, given the way that they've consistently shown to treat their workers and value their workers' contributions. But Apple has always been, for me, seen as a bastion of positive culture. I've had friends work at Apple. They speak great and highly about the organization. So again, if this is affecting one of the world's preeminent brands, an organization known for its culture, it's a warning signal to other organizations that you need to have a close relationship with your employees, and doing what you've always done is likely not enough going forward. We're going to have to look at this problem differently. And I get it. For small to medium business, they can't also bear the brunt of inflation. They can't raise wages 20 and 30% year over year, or they might go bankrupt. And while wages is cited as one of the issues here, my experience, Chris, in serving tens of millions of employees over the course of my tenure is that wage often isn't the number one driver behind any disengagement, any unionized effort. It's often a function of a broken relationship between the employer and the employee. The wages, though, is an easy headline to grab onto, and it's easy for us to relate to. Whereas that relationship is much more nuanced, there's much more gray area, and it's much more complicated.
Yeah. We had a great comment in a chat by our friend David Doze, the Vice President of Talent Strategy and Excellence at Shell. So he said, there's no doubt that equity, whether that's equity in pay, diversity, etc., is a major theme because of the impact of globalization, digitization, and the rise in incoming inequity. Since the 1980s, whilst overall standards of living has risen, the gap between the bottom and the top of society has just widened. And digitization creates both skills and effort bias changes at work, and work's becoming more intense. It's required a higher level of education levels, and digitization also creates more service jobs. And then, having been in this background for years, pay, employee / industrial relations will come to the fore more in coming years, basically. Thanks for that comment, David.
Yeah, thanks, David. But David's spot on. And again, this isn't, I don't think, a function of Apple or Amazon or Starbucks or any other individual employer. There's macroeconomic factors at play here which are driving this, and you can't put your head in the sand as an employer. You're going to have to do better.
Yeah. I suppose these are the companies that everyone just wants to put in the headlines as well, right? They get the attention, the media can pick on them. They're the ones that we all know and go to, right? As well. What do you think about the whole idea of, the bringing in the company, the anti unionization company, and having them hand out scripts to managers to say, this is what you got to say? Do you think that's a good idea?
Yes and no. This is, again, a nuanced issue. So yes, because when you are tasking individual line managers with speaking on behalf of a broader organization, you want to ensure that they don't misrepresent themselves or the organization in providing their feedback. And while scripting may appear disingenuous, the fact is that there are very real consequences, both legally and financially, for saying the wrong thing, even if it is well-intentioned. So, but I get the perception. Apple handing out scripts feels like we're giving scripts to robots to read the company line. They don't actually care about us. It's us versus them.
That's the way it's taken.
I get that perception.
Yeah.
That's the way it looks. And if you had managers speak from the heart, I've also been in a situation, Chris, where managers have spoken from the heart. There's no malice. But then in Canada, it's referred to as an unfair labor practice when a manager overstates a commitment or makes a personal commentary. And then that is used in some cases. In some jurisdictions, Chris, that could be the catalyst for a union vote in and of itself, because it could be seen as evidence of an organization's attempt to try and, resist a unionization effort, which is illegal in most jurisdictions. So there's a bit of I get the perception of being negative, but I also understand the reality Apple has to face. The other way of doing this is you could have more centralized call with one person speaking to many, but often what's more effective is a communication with the line manager and their employees. That's where the true relationship, that's where the rubber hits the road in most of these retail environments. These individuals working in malls across the United States or working in kiosks aren't interacting with the corporate office on a regular basis. Their interface with Apple is their store manager, is their management team, is their coworkers. And as a consequence, the messaging is often better from them. I would say in all cases, better from them.
Well, look, I think we'll wrap things up there, Matt, but any parting words of advice, given the fact you've been through this yourself multiple times for people listening?
Talk to your employees. This is, I've, again, run engagement programs for many large organizations. Engagement is not in and of itself a complex activity, but it's really hard to do. You need to ask your employees for their feedback, what's working, what's not working. You need to assess and analyze the feedback that you receive and parse out what actions you can take and what actions you can't take. Then you need to communicate that transparently to your employees and be honest about what you can and can't do and provide rationale for that. And then celebrate the wins along the way and repeat. That's what Apple needs to do here. That's what employees need to do here. Employers need to do here is have an honest dialogue. What's working? What's not working? How can we make this better? Because ultimately, if as an organization, we want to have a strong relationship with our employees where there isn't a third-party interface, we have to prove that we deserve that type of relationship.
Amazing. And also, we'd love to hear from everyone that's listening. If you're listening right now or tuning in after the fact, let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you're new to the show, we go live every single Friday. So please join us, like, comment, subscribe, tagging colleagues. But that's it for another episode of This Week at Work. Have a good weekend, everyone. And I'll see you again soon. Matt, pleasure as always. We'll see where you are next week when you join us, what location of Canada you'll be in or the world. We never know. But it's a pleasure. I'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone. Bye, Matt.
Take care.
Bye.